In this video, we're going to introduce the concept of an array. So an array is an object that can hold many variables of the same type. So let's say we needed to store 20 ints together. We could store them in an array. Or if we needed to store 30 strings together, we could store them in an array. And you can imagine an array looks like this. So in this case here, this array has 5 ints, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 73, 98, 86, 61 and 96. So these are stored in an object. Now you'll notice up the top it says 0, 1, 2, 3 and 4. That's because arrays have a thing called an index. So each item in the array, or each element in the array, has an index associated with it, and we use that index to either get things from the array or put things in the array. Now, one really important thing to note is that indexes start at 0. So while 73 is the first item in the array, its index is 0. 98 is the second item in the array, its index is 1. 96 is the fifth item in the array, but its index is 4. So indexes in arrays always start at 0. So if an array has a size of 20, its index is going to be from 0 to 19. Now normally when we declare a variable, we give the variable a name. But in an array, the variable doesn't have a name. These do not have names associated with them. Instead, the whole array has a name, so we give the array a name. So imagine this array here was called numbers. This int here, 61, we would identify it as numbers with a square bracket with 3 in, because 3 is its index. This 96 here would be identified as numbers with square brackets and 4 in, because its index is 4. So arrays, we're going to talk in a later video about other types of collections. Arrays are quite efficient. They're more efficient than comparable flexible size collections, and we'll talk about that in a later video. One thing to notice about arrays, so the pro is that it's more efficient. The con is we can't change its size when we initialize it, and I'm going to show you this in a minute. Once we create an array, we give it a size, and it cannot change. So if we create an array of size 20, that's its size. In later videos, we'll talk about flexible size collections in a coming up video, but they're not as efficient as an array. So arrays are good, they're fast, they're efficient, but we can't change their size. We can also store either primitives or objects in an array. So let's have a look at an example. So, 2 ways we can declare an array. You can see here, int, so this array is going to store ints, and notice an array has to store the same types. We can't have an array that stores ints and strings and doubles. If it's an int array, it stores ints. If it's a string array, it stores strings. So this one's going to store ints. We know that it's an array because we put the brackets here, the square brackets. We've given the array a name, so int array numbers equals new int, and I've given it a size. So this array now has a size of 20. That's how big it is. It can't be smaller than that. It can't be bigger than that. We've declared it as size 20, and that's the size it's going to stay. So first thing to note, when we declare an array, it must have a size. So what's the value of these ints? Well, because we haven't set them yet, they would be the default value for an int, which is 0. So if this was an integer array, the wrapper class for int, because that's an object, the default value would be null. If we declared an array of doubles, the default value would be 0.0 if it was the primitive double. So right now we have an array of size 20. So the index in this array is going to be from 0 to 19. And the array is full of ints that all have the value 0. So let's declare something. Let's assign one of these elements in the array a different value. So you can see I've said numbers, which is the name of the array, and then I've put my square brackets with 3. So I'm assigning a value to the index 3, in the element that has an index of 3 in the array. And I'm assigning the value 15. So now, in this array, the element at index 3 now has a value of 15. So when I'm assigning elements a value, this is how I do it. If I want to get something back out of the array, I'll use the array name numbers with the index afterwards in brackets. So this would print out 15 because I'm printing out the element at index 3. This second print line statement would print out 0 because I haven't, the element at index 4 is still 0. So the second way we can declare an array is like this. So this is an array of strings. We know it's an array because I have the square brackets. I've given it a name of names. That's what I'm calling this array. And I have assigned all of the elements a value. Now once again, we've given it a size. It knows that this array has a size of 3 because I've told it. Alex, David, Harry. I've put 3 elements in the array. So when I've declared this array and I've assigned all of the strings in the array a value, the array is given a size. So like in the first one, we said it was going to be a size 20, but we didn't assign any of the elements a value. In this case, I've given it a size of 3 and I've assigned all of the elements a value. So I've made a mistake here. Let me just fix this up. That should be names, names, and names. So now if I have my print line statement and I say names with an index of 0, it's going to print out Alex. If I print out names with an index of 1, it's going to print out David. And I could do the same thing. I could reassign things. If I wanted to change this element here, I could say names, that would be at index 2, 0, 1, and 2 equals John. So I can change the values in the array once I've declared the array. So to change the values, we do it like this. To get the values out, we do it like this. Now, what would happen if I tried to get something out of the array at an index that doesn't exist? Say, for example, this. System out print line names index 5. There's nothing at index 5. We would get an error, and I'll show you that as well shortly. So let's just comment that out, then we'll have a look at it. So let's just run this test array so you can see it work. I'll compile it. Okay, so I'm going to create a new instance of topic 4, and I'm going to run test array. There we go, 15. So we printed out the element at index 3 in the numbers array, and that's 15 because that's what we set it to. Numbers, the element at index 4 in the numbers array would be 0 because we didn't give that a value. And remember I said that if we declare an array and we don't give all of the elements values, they will be the default value for that data type. So the default value for an int is 0. We can see when we print out the names array, the element at index 0, it's Alex. And the element at index 1 is David. We can see that all works. Now let's try printing out this one here. So we're printing out the element at index 5 in the names array, and there's nothing at index 5. Let's see what happens there. So I will create a new instance of topic 4, and I will print out test array. Okay, we got, you can see here, an array index out of bounds exception. And you'll see here as well. Array index out of bounds exception. That's the error that happens when you try to get something out of an array at an index that does not exist. So the last thing we're going to look at with an array, let me just clear all of that. So far we looked at ints and we looked at strings. Now I have this student class here. A student has a first name and a last name. I have a constructor and I have an accessor for my first name, and I have a mutator for my first name. So you can see here, let me just comment out this code so this doesn't print. Okay, in this case, I'm creating an array of student objects. So just like I did with a string here, or a primitive here, I declare my array, but this time it's going to hold students. It's an array, we know it's an array because it has the square brackets. I've given the array a name, students, and I've said it equals new student, so I've given it a size of 20. Then what I've said is students 0, so the element at index 0 would be a student, and I've made it equal to a new student. So I'm calling the new student constructor here. The new student constructor takes a first and a last name. So I've passed it a first name, Alex, and a last name, Henry. So now I have this student array. It's an array that's going to hold student objects. Its size is 20. I have set the element at index 0 equal to a new student. So now what I can do is get that student. So I'm getting the student that I just created here. So I'm getting the student at index 0, and that's going to return a student. And then I'm calling the getFirstName method on the student. So that would print out Alex. If I was just to do this, student 0, it would just print out the object reference. And I'm also printing out a second student, the student at index 3. Now objects, remember an object's default value if it has not been initialized is null. So this here will print out null. This will print out an object reference because it is actually an object that has been initialized. So let's just compile and run this. So create a new instance of topic 4 and run test array. So we can see null, that was the student that we didn't initialize. This is the student we did initialize, and you notice it's printing out an object reference. That's what happens if we print out an object. To get something usable, we're going to have to call a method on an object, and that's what I had initially. So remember, this is going to return a student object, and this is going to return the first name. It's going to call the getFirstName method. So if I now compile my code, create a new instance of topic 4, and run test array, we will see it prints out the first name of Alex.